The daycare attendant has been overlooked and under-examined. Despite having a cool design and unique mechanics, the character's presence is rather limited, with seemingly no significant connection to anything at all. However, my findings in Ruin suggest a darker side to the character. We even see him steal Freddy in the first game, but no mention of this or why he's even doing it. We later know he becomes Eclipse, and the name Eclipse even means the sun being blocked by the moon. But there's something far darker and sinister hidden behind the sun and moon, and it dates back before Five Nights at Freddy's security breach, believe it or not, which builds into this massive story which we have coming up. But to understand what is truly going on beneath the surface, we need to cast our minds back to the beginning. Who is even the daycare attendant? Why does he split into two personalities and then later become Eclipse? And seemingly on the surface, he seems very nice, but there's a far darker side to his story than meets the eye, and believe you me, you're not going to want to miss any of it.
I am trapped in a nap! Reboot! We need to be whole!
Now, in the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, it's revealed that Sun and Moon was supposed to be a theatre act, where Sun would turn into his villain alter ego when the lights were turned off. But due to a programming bug, they were unable to switch this theatre mode off, so he'd always turn to the moon if the lights went off. So when they repositioned him in the daycare, they solved that problem by just saying, hey, well, let's just leave the lights on 24/7, which was a big mistake. That also plays into the theory as to why the daycare has emergency generators, because they cannot afford for the lights to go off.
Keep the lights on.
So even though they knew he had a split personality disorder, they still put him in the daycare. Now, the sun side of the animatronic, kids absolutely loved it. We even see handprints on his exoskeleton, presumably where he picks them up or kids are giving him a hug. But Moon, on the other hand, there's actually dialogue/notes left in Security Breach that it was giving children nightmares. However, Sun isn't outwardly aggressive, he's just very clingy and in your face. But Moon, on the other hand, far more dark and threatening. He's actively handing out punishments, putting children in timeout, and outright chases Gregory through the entire play structures, twisting, turning, and mutilating his body to do so. Even his counterpart, Sun, is severely disturbed by the moon.
Lights on! Lights on! I warned you! I warned you!
Now, one could argue that this is an act because he was programmed to do so in theatre mode, and that was never really switched, but there is no real evidence to suggest this. Now, when the lights eventually do come back on fully, Sun kicks you out of the daycare, and Moon chases you every hour when the lights go out, and then he kidnaps Freddy, and that's the last we ever really see of him until the Security Breach DLC Ruin. I mean, they're not disassembled, they don't play a part in the story, they just seemingly disappear. And it never really explains why the moon kidnaps Freddy. But we will get into that later on, along with far other darker stories. I mean, we return to the daycare later on in Security Breach, and Moon and Sun are completely absent. Now, the reason I've covered all this and kinda like recapped is so I can get into the main bulk of this video, because it's not just the sun and the moon. Yeah, we have the sun, we have the moon, but there's also the eclipse, which, as we know from Ruin, is the fusion of sun and moon, which again in itself is extremely odd because that isn't a mode or feature in the original daycare attendant. I mean, if it was, wouldn't that be the default mode he'd be in anyway, as opposed to these two separate schizophrenic parts? Something isn't adding up, and there's something wrong deep below the surface. Now, prior to Ruin, there was no real appearance, apart from a tiny appearance in Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, where it appears in an arcade machine, in Balloon World specifically. Now, it is hidden extremely deep, and it must mean something because it was one of the only few included in the game. Now, to get to this minigame, you have to solve a riddle and get into the daycare attendant's rancid back room. There's a poster on the door, and if you take a picture of all the characters in the Pizzaplex, it will eventually open, leading you to this arcade machine in Sun and Moon's back room. The fact that it's hidden and extremely hard to access tells me this must be of importance some way or somehow, and it is the hardest secret in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach game. And once you're finally in, you can play this arcade machine game, Balloon World. Balloon World is basically Flappy Bird but a knockout version, and not as difficult. You play as Balloon Boy going up and down, and you see the sun smiling in the background. When it turns to night, obviously, it will turn to moon, and then eventually back to the sun again. What is extremely interesting though is that when he is initially the sun, he has a lovely smile, then going into the moon with a very sinister grin. When he turns back to the sun again, he keeps his sinister grin. Now, this isn't the only secret hidden in this game. If you manage to snag a glitch, you will go into a glitch world where you see for the first time ever Eclipse, predating FNAF Security Breach's Ruin. Now in this world it's very glitchy and distorted, and you must follow the purple trail to win the game, essentially leaving it. Now the design of Eclipse is extremely important, and we'll cover that later on. But as for him actually physically appearing as Eclipse before we reboot him into this form with Cassie and Ruin, it doesn't happen. This is the only time we see him naturally in the FNAF world. But this minigame itself is proof that somebody knew of Eclipse's combined personality. So why was it never on show or activated? Well, let me continue to explain. Now, Eclipse becomes a full character in the Ruin DLC, appearing as a combination of the sun and moon forms. A bit in a heavily damaged state, Eclipse's endoskeleton is visible, showing how the daycare attendant works. His endoskeleton glowing either yellow or blue to appear as either form. He has damaged frills from the sun alongside the blue nightcap from the moon. It seems that Eclipse is always being torn to either sun or moon, which makes him creepy since he's like Moon's scariness and Sun's way too friendliness attitudes combined. Now this is where things start to get really interesting, because cast your mind back to the Ruin DLC game, Cassie is going around deactivating every single animatronic, apart from one, where she's told to reboot Sun and Moon, not dismantle it, unlike all the other animatronics.
Reboot! We need to be whole!
Now, I will be expanding on all of this in just 1 second. Let me just continue. Now, on a first visit, the Ruined Superstar Daycare looks pretty straightforward with not a lot of secrets to hide, even after multiple playthroughs. However, if you have more context around the DLC, you'll be able to find more hidden clues and secrets around this area, looking at it in a completely different light. Now, looking at Superstar Daycare, we can see that Vanny, the graffiti on the Superstar Daycare's wall, lets us know she was here after Security Breach, as it would be presumed that she's the one who wrote her own graffiti on the wall. There is a problem with this though, because a lot of people believe that Vanessa was Vanny, which is basically canon, and the ending for Vanessa is that she frees herself from Glitch Trap's control. This obviously isn't true because we see this graffiti on the wall. Well, it couldn't be the daycare attendant, because if we look at that even closely, there is some smudging. The daycare attendant was trying to clean it up, and we all know from Security Breach that he gets distracted by messes and goes to clean this up. Further to this, there's a man-made hole in the wall of the actual daycare where you see splattered in yellow paint slide into Fun, along with arrows pointing inside the opening to the daycare hanging by cables. This is the same sign that Gregory sees before he enters the yellow slide into the daycare. Someone has taken this sign and hung it above this. But you might be asking yourself, what has this actually got to do with the daycare attendant? Well, everything, so keep following along. Now, before meeting the ruined moon, you will stumble upon something interesting in the daycare. Inside the indoor jungle gym, there are parts from the glam rock endoskeletons lying around, like someone threw them there or dumped them there. There's an arm, a foot, another foot, and an upper torso. Now, the sight of a broken, torn, or powered off staff bots are not unusual in Ruin. Disassembled endos, on the other hand, are. And the fact that inside the jungle gym is an odd place to find endo parts. And since there was only one animatronic allowed inside the daycare, it was the daycare attendant. And how do we know it's the daycare attendant? Well, there are handprints embedded deeply into the floor and slide, and the only one who has hands that match the handprints on these specifically is the daycare attendant / Eclipse. But this leaves us with another interesting question. Why is he ripping apart an endoskeleton? And how does this all play into being Eclipse? Well, let me continue to explain. Now, first of all, the daycare attendant can be fully seen in the AR world, which is unlike some of the other animatronics, which are either having digital recreation of the lost parts, completely disappearing like the prototype, or just appearing as a purple mesh. However, what's more concerning is the fact that alarm bells should be ringing in the minds of theorists, and the fact of the matter is that there are lines running all over his body. Purple lines. The only animatronic, apart from Roxy, who has green ones, in the entire Pizzaplex to have these lines. And we all know how important color theory is in FNAF. This is not a good thing. These lines look like the Princess Quest 3 lines that are spreading out from the machine and infecting the network. But it's not the Princess Quest 3 arcade machine that covers the daycare attendant and purple lines. There's another arcade machine that has a stronger connection to him. Another one that has shown us Eclipse's face before he even appeared in Ruin, the Balloon World Boy arcade machine. But yes, you might be saying, oh well, we see the arcade in Ruin and it doesn't show the same lines on the daycare attendant or Princess Quest 3. Yes, I know that. The inner machines has been gutted as well. I know that. But remember, there's another Balloon Boy World arcade in the game, one that was unplayable in Security Breach and whose fate is currently unknown in Ruin. The one I'm talking about is in Burn Trap's boss arena. Am I saying the daycare is actually a villain? Yes, I absolutely am. Think about it, he is not an animatronic victim infected with a virus to make him more compliant or aggressive, nor is he some animalistic pile of parts and machines. Is he a willing participant in the dark side of the Pizzaplex? Why is the daycare attendant ripping apart endos? Because Vanny told him to do so. There's evidence from the endo parts lying around in both Vanny's little hideout and the daycare attendant's own room. And have you ever wondered why Moon attacked and kidnapped Freddy? It's because Vanny had found out Freddy was helping Gregory. And when would she have done this? Well, when she put Gregory in the Lost and Found. Remember, he kind of blacks out and you wake up in the Lost and Found? Because it's there she revealed she knew his name. And remember that sequence in Parts and Service, I believe?
His name is Gregory. You know how I know that? His Fazwatch kept repeating it in your voice. Gregory, are you there? Gregory?
Vanessa, all the fast watches sound like me.
I mean, either way, Vanny had to tell Moon what to do. Moon is the one who kidnapped Freddy, brought him into Parts and Service where Vanessa was waiting to question him. You're telling me that Moon isn't working for Vanny? That just doesn't make sense. And now we know that the daycare attendant is firmly on the villain side? Well, Moon is anyway. I believe Sun isn't, and we'll get into that later. But what does this mean for Cassie when she reboots him into Eclipse? Bad things. Very, very bad things. Eclipse, as he is now, has never existed in-universe before Ruin. There's no mention of his persona in security breaches messages or logs, no plushes we can find, no lore of him in the tale books. Eclipse is literally a brand new character to the FNAF universe. And the only hint of him is in the Balloon World game itself, where players follow a purple path of glitches on the screen. Purple path of glitches. Until the very end of that game, where a smiling face covers the screen with tears and glitches, and the last word you'll read on screen is "Good night." And this is where it gets even more interesting, because Eclipse's face tells us what kind of an eclipse he is. He's a solar eclipse, and it's where the moon is in front of the sun, or when the sun is hidden behind the moon. And as I said earlier, the book informs us that Fazbear Entertainment wanted Sun to be the dominant persona for the daycare, but a glitch prevented Moon's permanent termination by them until Fazbear Entertainment decided to keep both personas for cheap reasons. Glitchtrap, for reasons unknown to us, wants Moon. He wants us to keep him around, and the Mimic himself even says, turn on the generators, then reboot the attendant.
You did it! Look, he's stuck. He's stuck. Go, go, go! Hurry, go fix it. Use your fast wrench. Go!
The daycare attendant is the only animatronic that we're told to reboot. And you know who's controlling our actions, right? We're told to reboot him, putting him into this Eclipse mode only means bad things. I mean, we're forced to go inside the daycare when there's no reason to even go in there in the first place. There's no security nodes in the actual daycare. They're all outside of it. And think about it logically. Moon is no longer as threatening as he was in Security Breach. Simple flashlight can now trick his sensors into bringing Sun out when it's not daytime. So he is useless to the villain unless they can fix him. That's why they needed Cassie to take a detour from her main mission to do this side quest. But you might be thinking, well, Eclipse was nice to Cassie. He didn't kill her. He can't be evil. I like him. And that is one of the reasons probably why he is evil. Narratively, it's extremely satisfying. After rebooting him, Eclipse said to Cassie that she was a child in danger and activated safety mode.
Warning! Warning! Child in danger! Safety mode active.
Immediately taking it out of the daycare and locking the doors behind him so she couldn't go back inside to clean up. Now, Eclipse could have easily have helped Cassie like Freddy did with Gregory to get her out of the Pizzaplex, or kept her safe in the daycare, basically pulling a Sun like where Sun was keeping Gregory in the daycare until the morning. But he did none of those things. Instead, he chose to leave Cassie outside of his safety. He didn't kill her, no, but only because Cassie still had another part to play. She had to deactivate those security nods, and everything was all going according to plan. They told Cassie to reboot the attendant, and now he's become whole. He can roam free. The change in lighting can no longer affect him. Them two personalities are now melded into one. Daytime, nighttime, sun or moon, it doesn't affect him anymore. He is one. How does this play in the story and the future of FNAF? Well, what I do know is that an improved daycare attendant is now Lutz in the Pizzaplex. No matter which ending is chosen, he is out there. Perhaps the answer to the question may reveal itself in Help Wanted 2, or perhaps the next DLC for Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe right now, because there's plenty of FNAF content coming up and on the channel. Go check it all out. I'd also like to thank the Redditor Bon Jonesy, who I basically based this theory off, so thank you very much for helping me out on Reddit, and stay safe out there, superstars.